You guys, can you smell that? It smells like desperation from the National Party, and you can see it on their social media feed right now because, whoa, over the last week, they've outright lied and misled so many times. Like this one that they're really excited about. Treasury report cast doubt on Greens wealth tax. The two places that were actually claiming that that's what this report does before National boosted it were the Herald and a blurb from the Taxpayers Union. The Herald paywalled story actually links to the report, a 2023 exploration of a possible wealth tax requested by then Finance Minister Grant Robertson. It states really clearly that there are a number of missing variables from the request, which means they can't give them full information. But those bits of missing information are in the Greens proposal, like the level of income that a wealth tax would start at. And it also, in that report, if Nationals suddenly want to start listening to what that report says, which it kind of sounds like they do based on their posts, well, it recommends a capital gains tax and an inheritance tax. But because it's buried behind a paywall, and the Google result shows the report is 3 years old, so it doesn't look like the report that puts doubt on the Green proposal at a glance right now, this is really just a giant shell game of cherry-picked data from within a right-wing pro-government ecosystem. And this is not the only time that we see this kind of action happen on their social media pages, like the claim that Labour is introducing 7 new taxes. Labour's only announced a single new tax, a capital gains tax, where the proceeds will be ring-fenced for their health policies. But National are deliberately conflating the Greens tax plan with Labour's, which is the same as saying if you vote National, you support Winston Peters' penis police bills. There's this claim about food inflation being 4 times higher under Chris Hipkins, and technically that's true because of this little thing called a global pandemic, which caused COVID-era supply chain issues. Kind of like what's actually happening right now with the drive-up of inflation due to supply chain problems that National are facing due to the oil crisis. But I guess by National logic, the 4.1% inflation rate that was announced earlier this week, the highest in 2 years, well, I guess that must be National's fault then. Oh, and then there's this claim that Chippy and Chloe think they can spend your money better than you, or that they want to treat you like an ATM. I mean, it is the job of the government to spend tax revenue to keep the country going. We decide with our vote which politicians and parties and their views that we agree with when it comes to how we want to see that spent. And remember, when it comes to treating us like an ATM, that this is the government that chose to do that by cancelling ferries to pay more for smaller replacements that are going to take longer to get here just to own the left, or put out useless road cone hotlines, or landlord tax breaks, or tobacco company tax kickbacks, or flying themselves up a mountain to eat pavlova for cameras, or claiming $1,000 a week in entitlements for houses that they already own, or going to the Pacific Islands to pick up a title that the Prime Minister begged for. Then there's this one. This is a new attack line that I've been using. Norway is expected to lose $11 billion a year, $11 billion each year due to its wealth tax. We shouldn't risk it here. The claim here is actually really that the rich flee instead of paying a fair tax rate. In Norway, out of 230 to 240,000 millionaires, 300 left, about 0.1% of their millionaires, and the wealth tax was one of the multiple reasons that were actually given by them for why they left, which included hiked taxes on business dividends and an increase in the amount on CGT. Wealth tax revenue has increased steadily from 18 billion kroner when it first started in 2021 to 34 billion in 2024, and Norway still ranks near the top for quality of life, economic stability, human development, and GDP per capita. They're strongly buoyed by a sovereign wealth fund like Labour's proposed Future Fund. There's world-class public infrastructure and universal healthcare because Scandinavian outlooks on taxes see it as a social contract, not as an obligation to be avoided like National seems to be pushing. Instead of it being this thing that Norway is backtracking on as well, they're actually tightening loopholes to stop the wealthy from escaping with unrealized capital gains liabilities. But hey, National pretty much just Googled why is wealth tax bad and made the answer their campaign here. There's this repeated claim about missing plans for finances. National still haven't released their plan, and in 2023 they didn't release their financial plan until 2 weeks before the election day, when early voting had just started. Or there's this claim about less money being spent on consultants and more on frontline services. You know, this week was actually supposed to be the week that they opened a new modular wing at Waikato Hospital, which hasn't even been started yet. Yeah, and if you ask almost any frontline public servant, they will tell you that there is no truth that anything has been done to really invest in frontline services. And sure, the budget has gone up, but CTU data shows that what's actually happened is bigger number is bigger logic, the amount of money that's been put in there is barely keeping up with the rate of inflation across most industries. So it's not really doing much to help frontline services. And it's pretty easy to move consultant budget to a professional services budget on a spreadsheet. And their own graph also shows that the time the public sector consultant costs were increased the most was in the midst of a major health crisis response that drove those increases. Oh, and then there's this claim that Labour got nothing built, so they need to completely redo the RMA and take out anything to do with Indigenous partnerships or protections for the environment. Well, Labour started Auckland Light Rail, Let's Get Wellington Moving, there was 3 water reform and Kāinga Ora public housing pipelines, which National cancelled. So the reason that they can make this claim, I guess, is because National decided to stop the projects. Labour also connected a bunch of wind farm and solar energy projects. They used some of the COVID loan that this government keeps saying has gone missing to pay for shovel-ready projects like Auckland University's social work building or $700 million worth of regional road cycleways and port upgrades. There was regional civic complexes like sports facilities and community hubs or housing development infrastructure, like extending water pipes and roading extensions. And there's $460 million in climate resilience projects. They were all undertaken with support from the government, but not done by them directly. Or there's this claim that they've increased our trade and exports. The majority of our export growth has actually been because of factors like how weak our dollar has become and how our economy has evolved since the COVID-era supply constraints and adjustments in international commodity prices that we don't set. It factors in seasonal shifts in our export production after drops caused by events like Cyclone Gabrielle shat on our apple and forestry industries, and that's now returning to pre-event levels. And global inflation still drives prices up steadily because lower inflation simply means slower price increases, and we do currently have issues with global inflation rising again because of that oil crisis happening thanks to America and Iran. Their logic is National's fault. It's all National's fault. The fact is, this is a party that's constantly resorting to lying to voters to try and stay doing what it is that they're doing. The sad part is there are people out there who will blindly agree with what they say and never critically evaluate any of the claims being made. Now, most of you are smarter than that, and it's good to question any policy from any party. But when they straight up lie to you, then you really should be asking why, and then showing them when voting starts how you feel about being lied to constantly and having your intelligence questioned like that.
Hello there, Kia ora podcast listeners. This was a really fascinating and fun one for me. I was sitting there and debating whether or not I'd do something on the whole Stuart Nash thing, but because that's the whole New Zealand First Party kerfuffle, bullshit thing, whatever you want to describe it, however you want to describe them, is the newsletter topic for this week. I thought, no, I might skip that and use that for later in the weekend. But I keep being sent people keep sending me all these messages going, is this accurate with shit that they'd been seeing on the National Party social media pages? And of course not. It is very rare for National to say anything accurate in there, particularly when they're doing their attack stuff. And they have to get it out of the way now because the regulated period starts in about 2 weeks. So they need to start getting their head down, doing the job to get people thinking the right thing. And yeah, there are some people who just buy it blindly, and there's a whole bunch of people who raise questions, and those are the people that I'm trying to talk to with this one. The people who are like blind over anything National says. They're probably a lost cause, to be honest. And that's sad because I would love to see more people think critically about all the political parties out there. But the one that got me is I'd actually just finished recording the original version of this, and this thing popped up on my feed going, new report, Treasury says Greens wealth tax not going to work. I'm like, wow, that's fascinating because I didn't think that we had a Treasury report that came out saying how well or poorly something had been budgeted from within one of the parties running for election. So I checked it out, and it linked to this article that the Herald had, and it was paywalled. I'm like, oh, okay. And it was more paywalled than usual. It was just like the first couple of lines I thought that was visible, and I thought that was really interesting. So I Googled it, and it came up with the taxpayer quote-unquote union thing, which referenced the Herald report. And so there's this kind of feedback loop going there and nothing else other than this old report from 2023. And my first thought was, there can't be that report because that's 2023. So anyway, I went and checked out the non-paywalled version of the Herald article, and it had a link to that 2023 report, which has just been made public. That's why it's new. But it is literally just a report to Grant Robinson going, hey, you wanted to know a little bit more about capital gains tax? We can't give you all this detail because we don't have it. You haven't given us things like what level you're looking at, for example, that you want to start instigating a capital gains tax in on people's wealth. So there's a whole bunch of factors that we can't give you specifics on. We can just give you a few heads up on, yep, this is certainly going to bring in the money that you want it to bring in, but there will also be a risk of it being a lot more complicated to keep control of and to actually make work, and there is a risk of people fleeing because they don't want to pay it. But if you wanted to make the same amount of money without all that work, get a capital gains tax and an inheritance tax, which are both tax policies that are in the Green Party tax manifesto, and the CGT in a much smaller scale is part of the Labour Party policies. So they're already doing what the report says, or they're already promoting what the report actually did say, with a wealth tax on top of it, which is hilarious. So National's like, oh, they're not listening to the report. National aren't listening to the report. You can't get them to do a capital gains tax or an inheritance tax. Like they would rather swim through acid or stand in a pool of their own pee before doing anything like that. So it was a really fascinating one, and then I went through and I had other examples that I'd pre-recorded earlier. So I'm like, let's look into this. Let's see how many more false claims there are. And as you can see, there's a shitload, and they add more and more every day. So this is something I'm going to give you guys a heads up on as podcast listeners. Other people will obviously see it a little bit later, but from this weekend, we're going to start rolling out a new fact check every day on something that somebody with the government or media has said that's blatantly false or needs to be corrected or was clearly misleading. So it might be something like this claim that we've just seen about the taxes, or it could be something like when Nicola Willis said that it was wrong to circumvent select committee processes and rush things under urgency when she was in opposition. But now they've got the record for having done it more than anybody else. So yeah, I think I've got 50 different fact checks at the moment. So there's almost 2 months worth of fact checks, and I'm sure plenty more will come up between now and election time. So those will start rolling out daily on stories this weekend, and probably the end of next month on YouTube, just because of how far ahead I am with getting things out on that particular platform for short. So yeah, that's the game plan. Let's see how it rolls. So in the meantime, enjoy this episode. Don't forget, if you're a paid subscriber for the newsletter, you can access that tomorrow from 10 o'clock in the morning. And if you want the free subscription, you'll be able to access that from 10 o'clock on Sunday morning. Until next time, look after yourself. Ka kite anō. Live long, prosper, be one with the force, and I will see you all later.